The orchestra performing this piece will never play it like this again. That's because of the death of their music director and conductor, Michael Morgan of the Oakland Symphony. We'll tell you about his unusual path to prominence. And then there's this.
You'd have to kill me. You'd have to.
Violinist and composer Curtis Stewart. He calls his latest album Of Power. It's what he calls his re-contextualized music.
We home, sleep.
There's also some news about new music based on Amanda Gorman's poem at the inaugural, a reissue of the music of Saint Georges, and a bit more. From the Second Street Dreams audio network, this is Classical Music in Color. News, information, and music about people of color in classical music. I'm Judelyn Gibson. By now, some of you may know what it's like to hear a live performance of an orchestra again. What a joyous sound. You're listening to a rehearsal sneak peek of the Oakland Symphony back in 2015. Conductor Michael Morgan was standing at the podium giving direction with gusto as he did for 30 years. Here he is in June announcing the symphony season for 2021 and 22 while joking about his health.
Big thanks to all of you who have been so supportive. I've heard from so many people about, people who heard from people about the kidney transplant, getting in touch with me, because it's not a secret, and as I told Tina and Diego, if you could make any money off of it, do so.
We're taking you and the kidney out on tour later,
So anything that happens to me, if they can turn it into cash, great. So anyway, thank you all for being supporters for all these many years. I can't believe it's 30, but that's what they tell me. So here's to 30 more.
Sadly, he died in August of complications from that kidney transplant. And on their memorial page for Morgan, the Oakland Symphony does ask for donations in his memory. A quote here from that page: "Guarantee that Michael Morgan's artistic vision for the Oakland Symphony plays on." Michael Morgan leaves behind a legacy of success. He was one of the rare black composers to rise to prominence with guest appearances at leading orchestras all over the world, but it was Oakland where he stayed. Morgan started his career as a conductor early. He was 12 years old in his hometown of Washington, D.C., conducting a middle school orchestra and one at his church. Then it was on to Oberlin Conservatory, where he worked with conductors Seiji Ozawa and Leonard Bernstein, landing in Oakland as music director in 1991. And he worked with orchestras, operas, and ballet companies all over Northern California. The Oakland Symphony says they are planning a memorial service to honor him. Michael Morgan was 63 years old. You're listening to the September 2021 edition of Classical Music in Color. I did a lot of interviews with musicians, singers, and composers during the height of the pandemic, many of them cooped up in their homes without face-to-face human contact for months on end. They were forced to find new ways to expel their creativity.
At one point, I was putting like 2 songs out a week, which is crazy. I was just trying to escape from the anxiety of day-to-day life in New York City, and at that time, and so I just worked up the guts to put out some music. And then by the time August rolled around, I was like, wait, this feels like an album.
And it was an album.
My name is Curtis Stewart, and my most recent release is Of Power.
Don't expect Curtis Stewart's album Of Power to be, searching for words here, normal, mainstream. Here's an example.
When somebody listens to it, it's like, wait a second. Like, I played a concert where I was playing, I did a solo version of Stevie Wonder, Isn't She Lovely? And I never really announced what the song is. And it was funny, this person came up to me right after, and she was like, wait, Isn't She Lovely? That wasn't Stevie Wonder, was it? Because, I mean, it's like people listen to the music, and it's funny that how many times people say, I didn't know you could do that on violin, or... wow, just things that to that nature, and to me that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But I'm glad that, and so like it's hard to even hear the source material of Stevie Wonder, John Coltrane, Childish Gambino, Charlie Parker, Niccolo Paganini, Beethoven, like to put all this stuff in this. It's hard to recognize the source material when it's put in a different context. So it's like recontextualized is, I guess, what I would say. Maybe that's what.
Recontextualized. Okay.
Recontextualized. That's my fancy word.
About the Paganini, this is Stewart's improvisation on Paganini, Caprice number 11, Andante. And how did you choose the composers that you did? Charlie Parker?
I mean, basically, I chose music that I thought that I've just loved, and Charlie Parker has this real intricacy in terms of the construction of his melodies. They're so complicated, but also have so much like a sense of a song. It's songful, but also really complex. And I just thought, what if I turn this into like a violin kind of like, not showpiece, but I'm like moving all around the instrument. And basically that piece, Scrapple, is essentially totally through composed. And it's also matched with, kind of like 808s.
808. It's the Roland TR 808, a drum machine created in the early 80s. Tell me about you. What's your background? How'd you come up with some of the things that you came up with?
Sure. Both of my parents are musicians. My dad plays jazz tuba. He's played with people like Dizzy Gillespie and Sonny Rollins and Chick Corea, and all the people he's toured around the world with them. My mom is a violinist who grew up in Poland. She's Greek, so she was like hanging out with like Greek gypsies. There's one piece on the album that's written by her based on a traditional Greek folk song called Mangas. So all my music I've played in bands with both of my parents. It's been rough as it's been for everybody. My main anxiety was with my mom, who is, very, very, I'm her caretaker, and so she's very at risk in terms of health. And at one point I was going to her house almost every day. I would have to bike from northern Manhattan to about the Upper West Side area because I didn't want to take the train. I didn't want to take a car. I don't drive. And so I was biking every day to sleep over there to make sure she was okay at night. And then I would come back. And recently we got 24-hour care, which is really good. But It's funny, I got a lot of my best work done while I was laying there awake at her house worrying about everything. I got my best work done during those times, and a lot of the music was written while I was in the house, and it kind of refers. I hope that the story. There is no real story. It's not like a linear story, but just the kind of confessional that's happening.
Right.
Is open ended enough for people to put their own stories into it to relate to. Um, but a lot of what I'm writing about is referring to my situation with her. All my music kind of comes from that. There's really no. It's not that I'm trying to cross genres. I'm just trying to express the music that has kind of come through me. Just because I've existed in classical settings. I went to the Eastman School of Music. I teach at Juilliard now. Um, and I've also been, hung out with a lot of jazz people, and I played in a hip hop trio when I first moved to New York, called Mighty Third Rail. We went to Edinburgh and won some stuff over there for the Fringe Festival. And yeah, I'm just kind of like expressing myself. I feel like I'm a New Yorker, and the music that's coming out is like a kind of New York classical.
We leave our visit with Curtis Stewart and his album Of Power with his full rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing.
God of our silent tears. God of our weary years. Sing a song, full of faith, sing full of hope. When hope unborn had died. Facing the rising sun, new day begun. Let us march on until victory is won. The dark past has taught us a hope the present has brought us. The dark past has taught us a hope the present has brought us.
Yet with a steady beat,
Has taught us
have not a weary feet.
the present has brought us till heaven and earth reign.
Lift every voice, brick by brick, and sing.
Curtis Stewart recorded the album during the COVID lockdown in his apartment in New York with help from Prince's sound engineer Derek Lindsay from Paisley Park. Of Power was released on the Bright Shiny Things label. You're listening to Classical Music in Color for September 2021. Our coda this month features news about The Hill We Climb. It's a film, a performance video, featuring a new composition by John Clayton. It was inspired by Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb, the one she delivered at President Biden's inaugural.
When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is.
It was performed by the cellist Amit Peled and the Mount Vernon Virtuosi out of Baltimore, Maryland. Tafelmusik, the orchestra and choir, has re-released its 2003 album, The Music of Joseph Bologne, Chevalier de Saint-Georges. The group says the goal of reissuing his music is to properly center the composer's achievements in the long overdue reckoning on race in the United States. Live opera returns to the Met stage with Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones. Will Liverman plays the lead. It is the first time ever the Met has staged an opera by a black composer. It opens September 27th. According to the Institute for Composer Diversity, work scheduled for performance by women comprise 12% and nearly 17% are by composers of color. Still, more than 3/4 of the works performed by America's orchestras this coming year will be by white men. You'll find the links to all on the Classical Music in Color page on secondstreetdreams.com. Thank you for listening to this, the September 2021 edition of Classical Music in Color. I'm Judlyn Gibson. We're the Second Street Dreams audio network on the radio and on the www on secondstreetdreams.com.